Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 158. My guest in this episode is Sharifah Hardie. Sharifah is a business consultant, talk show host, serial entrepreneur, author, and community leader. And they happen to be running for governor of California for 2026, which is be my first gubernatorial candidate on the show, and I wish her Godspeed. We talk about the business consulting and the entrepreneurship and the books, but we had her on more specifically to talk about her work with the Tarot. And I think I was recently inspired to re-examine the Tarot generally because of the Asset Horizon podcast, and they have, I think, a new deck that they released, and so that caught my attention. And Sharifah is very involved with the work in the Tarot and multi-generational work. So, it made sense to have her on after speaking with her incidentally, not because of the Asset Horizon podcast. And so we had a very lovely and productive conversation. And so we explore the Tarot and we explore what it means to her and how she divines information, if you will, from that. And for myself, I love it in the beauty and the aesthetics and the imaginal space that is opened up, and perhaps the Donetian intuition pumping that might occur when one is faced with these archetypal cards and the representation. So anyway, enough about me babbling. Please enjoy the conversation with Sharifah. I'd like to welcome Sharifah Hardie to the IdeaCast interview series. We're going to have a diverse conversation. We're going to talk about some things that she and I have already, I'd say, partnered with and discussed and talked about. I was on her show, and you'll find out in just a minute what that's about. But I'd like to firstly welcome the YouTube audience as well. Welcome to you all. And Sharifah, welcome to you. Good evening or good day to you.
Good day. Thank you. Thank you, Justin. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you because you were a gracious host to me and we had a lovely conversation, and I want that to continue into this conversation. So glad to have you here and looking forward to learning from you and getting some insights and learning about you as well. And on that subject, I think if you don't mind, let's find out a little bit about you, and you share whatever you're comfortable with, but let's learn about you and where you're coming from and where you've come from historically.
Absolutely. I'm a business consultant. I'm also a third generation tarot reader. I started off on this journey when I got laid off 8 times. And I always wanted to be an employee. That was not my lot in life, as they say. And so that took me along the entrepreneurial journey. And also having 2 children, being a teenage mom, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. That was my focus. That was my goal. And so back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I started building websites. And by building websites, I went into online marketing because people said, "Oh, Sharifah, you built your website. Now build us a website. Oh, now you're marketing your website. Market our website." And if I'd have known then how far ahead of my time I was, I would have purchased all the one-word domain names. But I didn't know how far ahead I was. And in fact, back in that time frame, people felt that if you didn't leave the house to go to work, you were lazy. And that's what I was told, that I was lazy, because who ever heard of people who worked from home, right? Mm-hmm. So again, I was ahead of my time. But, our technology has changed as well. Back then, printers were huge, computers were huge, people didn't have fax machines at home. So technology has allowed us to do more today than ever before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned being a single mom and this, I'd say the erroneous perception of the stigmatizing that goes on about someone who's working from the home. My mother was, divorced and single mom, and she had a job. She went to work, but she also, in between jobs or when, she had time on the weekend, she would sew and she would create crafts, pot holders, things like that. And, worked really hard and made a lot of money. So I see the context, and now it's normal, right? We're in 2025 right. And a lot of people work from home, and that makes sense in a lot of contexts too, especially in the information age. So yeah, you were ahead of your time in that sense. So to heck with
Yes.
those people that said that. Oh
That
my
was a long
gosh.
time ago. They're not saying that now.
No, no, that's changed. And so putting your projecting into the future, do you think so there was a little bit of a pushback post-COVID about, get back to work, come back to the office, that kind of thing. But do you see like in the future, and of course AI could have an influence on this, like the normalizing of working from home or renormalizing, getting back into that where companies aren't paying rent or leasing out buildings and things like that. What do you think about all that as far as working from home?
I think COVID and the global pandemic had a lot to do with changing that norm because, like you said, companies realized that they save money by having employees work from home. They save money on rent, but they also realized that employees who weren't customer facing, there really was no reason for them to have to be in the office. And there was more as far as productivity that they felt from their employees because so often when you're in an environment with so many different people, there's so many different distractions, so many people, coworkers that you spend a lot of time at the water cooler with. Now you're at home, you're working, you're focused. Entrepreneurs, business owners, they're able to do more from home. When we went through the global pandemic, there were many parents who had to also be teachers, because they had to teach their children as well. So people became used to it and adjusted to it. So there are some corporations and companies who said you have to get back in the office, where there were many companies that said, you know what, this really works. And I speak to so many. I love to call centers or companies and ask them where they're located. And many of them will tell you they work from home.
Mm, mm. Yeah, there's just, and I'm naive when it comes to big business and handling the type of things that could facilitate working from home, but it just seems intuitively sensible to when it's feasible and when it makes sense to afford that to someone. And wouldn't that be nice for people again who are single parents or raising children or co-raising children with a partner, and they can be more flexible in that regard with care of children. So I think that's really cool. Um, Now, I want to switch gears because I think I'll speak selfishly as to why I brought you on the show, and that is to learn about. You mentioned the Tarot earlier and being third
Yes.
generation Tarot reader, and so my audience is coming from philosophy and a little bit of psychology and things like that, and I do think those things can be lures or attractors to the idea of working with the tarot deck. And there's a podcast that I like that I was really hard-nosed philosophy people, and they were doing an episode on a woman that developed a deck that's outside of the Rider Waite Tarot, and it was really interesting. But these guys were normally real straight-faced and and they had an episode on the Tarot, and it was about a few days before you and I got together last week, and I thought, well, that's providential. I think that's that's kind of neat. And I listened to the episode. It was fun. So anyway, I'm rambling, blah, blah, blah. But again, I say that to set up this idea that I think there are members of the audience that would love to hear from you about this. And they may be familiar with the Tarot already. But as if someone, and I will have links to your website and your socials down below. And if people go through and start reading the news articles that you have in your website, there's some mention there where you're interested in demystifying the tarot and getting it either more accessible to people or breaking some of the funny little stigma bubbles, just like working from home around the tarot. And so wherever you want to start, I'll hand that over to you, and let's talk tarot for a little bit.
Well, I think one of the main aspects that I would love to demystify is that within that community, people like to make it feel like, or make other people feel like they're special, that they're the only ones who can do it, and that puts them between the person and spirituality, in my opinion. It means that I have to go through you in order to get the messages. And that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted people to understand that we're all intuitive, we're all psychic, we all have abilities, especially when we train our abilities. I mean, so many people have natural abilities outside of that, whether they're wonderful naturally in sports or music or whatever it is. Tarot is the same way. If you study it and if you focus it, it's just really focusing your natural intuition, your natural abilities to be able to connect. And so then when you begin to learn the deck and what its meanings are, it's just really, I always call it like, it's like a stop sign, right? A stop sign is a symbol. It's created there to symbolize that when you reach this point, you need to stop, right? So if you don't know what that means or what that symbol means, then you would have no idea that it was necessary for you to stop. So for me, it's just about learning and understanding what the signs and symbols are. And because I've not only studied them, but I've associated a certain meaning with each card. So if I'm reading for someone and that card comes up, I already know automatically this is what it means to me. And so there are so many different readers, and I love how more and more people, especially doing the show, Read Me Live, when I speak to people and I'm like, have you ever had a reading? And more people are saying, oh yeah, my friends read for me. I'm a reader, and it just starts with it starts an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm. And again, for those watching or listening, that you just mentioned Read Me Live, and I said a moment ago very generically that I would have links, and that's one of the links that I'll have is your show, Read Me Live. And again, I was a guest on there, and I loved it. I have to confess, I've been sloth this week, and I had to work this week, but I'm going to unpack that reading and look into the cards some more on my end and really take it in. But I wrote everything down that you had drawn and talked to me about. And so I still have that experience to go through. But I am looking forward to it. So if you don't mind, speak to the family lineage. And so, was it always present in your home? And did you witness your mother doing readings, or what was that relationship like when it was onboarding for you and being assimilated as part of your development?
Well, my grandmother, which was my father's mother, was a reader. And my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother read with playing cards. She never used the tarot card,
Ah, okay,
right?
cool.
So
Yeah.
again, it's just symbolism, what you associate with the meaning to. And so then my grandmother and my mother began to read, and then my mother taught me how to read. So it wasn't something that I really saw too often around the house, but my
Okay.
mother especially is very psychic, just naturally. My mother would have dreams, and if my mother dreamed something, we knew it was going to come to pass. My
Mm.
mother would see spirits, she would hear spirits, so it was just something that was always around me. And then later on, she taught me how to read, and it was one of the things that we enjoy doing together. We love going to psychic fairs. To this day, we'll go to a psychic fair. My mom just celebrated her 70th birthday, and she went to a metaphysical store to get her reading for her birthday. So it's just something that is just a part of my life.
Mm. Mm. I love that you mentioned playing cards because I took a class years and years, probably 35 years ago, on the tarot, and the lady, I think her name was Jillian Macbeth. What a name
Uh,
for
Stage
yeah,
name, that's what it sounds like.
right, Jillian Macbeth. I think that was her name, and forgive me if it's not, but anyway, because that was a long time ago. And she worked with we did the regular cards, like we had our own deck that we'd bring in. I think I had an herbal tarot because I had a friend that was an herbalist, and I got a deck from her. So anyway, but she would have us do the playing cards as well, just the regular diamonds and spades and clubs and everything like that. And I like that too because yeah, you can just sort of, it's more that you are engaging with the, like you said, the symbolism and the meaning of the card and things like that. So it is possible to do it that way. So I love that you brought that up because that brought a memory back for me to do that. Now, speaking of my taking that class and trying to nurture my intuition and maybe interpret the cards rather just face value and, reading something, and really developing a relationship with them. Can you speak to your development, in doing that so that maybe someone in the audience can get a glean from you? I can't really describe it, but like you just kind of get this thing where the card kind of speaks to you in a sense, or you get into this reciprocal kind of relationship. That's me, and that's been a long time. So if you don't mind sharing, like, what would you say to someone who's just jumping in or just getting into, like, they bought a deck and playing with the cards? What would you share with us about maybe feeling or just what's going on with you in the card when you open up to it and you're intuiting what's going on?
Well, the number one thing that I would say is find a meaning for each card. Whatever that is, find that meaning, because that meaning will take you no matter what deck you're looking at, right? So often we get so caught up in the book, reading the book. What does the book say? But then if you get another deck, that deck is going to have another book, which tells you something completely different, right? There's a chart where you can write down a keyword for each card. And whether you do it from a keyword list that other people have or the keyword that you create, it's about what it means to you. I think that's the most important thing. I was teaching a class of college students the other day, and one of the things that I was expressing to them is that over time, the meanings of the cards will change for you. And they have to change because your perception of life changes, your experience change, right? So if you're reading for someone and you've never been on a first date or you've never been married, then you really don't have the experience to be able to give that type of advice, right? You can grow into it, but as your experiences, and that goes for careers as well. Someone who's just in college, they've never had a job. They've never held a job. They haven't been in the workforce for 20, 30 years. So their experience is limited. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't start. What it means is that everything evolves. So find that meaning for that one card, what it means to you, and then watch the evolution of what, words change all the time. Our understanding of words change. And that's why I tell people all the time, I've never in my life had a reading that was wrong. However, I've misinterpreted many readings, right? Because the message was there, the cards were there, but then something happens and I look back and I say, oh, okay, that's what they were trying to say. That's what it means, because it's my interpretation. I am interpreting. So I always tell people, first of all, you have to have some type of belief system, what you believe. It doesn't have to be what Justin believes or what Sharifah believes. It's what you believe. Because if you're telling someone a story, which tarot is, it's a story. It's the story of the fool's journey, because God protects fools and infants. Those are the only two people on earth that don't think they know everything. So when you start off on this journey, you'll have one idea. But then by the time you get more and more experience in life and in readings, you're like, oh, okay, now I have a different understanding of this whole journey.
Which speaks to how we learn sometimes. Like you said, fools and children, they're not burdened by this egoic trap of being sure of oneself, or, feeling as though you have the answers, or, you're just about to have the answers, so that there's this kind of naivety that I think is almost a superpower when you use it right. So it's kind of I'll babble a little bit, like a healthy skepticism, right? That I'm not sure, I don't know, but let me ask a good question. And that's kind of what the deck's doing with you in a relationship, is it's allowing you to ask perhaps healthy questions. And their interaction, the cards' interaction with you are standing out to you, and they're informing you. So I like that relationship.
It's all a relationship.
Sense.
No, but it's all a relationship, right?
Yeah.
When you look at English is a language. When you look at tarot is a language. So English is made up of letters that make up words, that make up sentences, that make up paragraphs, that make up stories, right? Tarot is the same thing. Each card makes up a part of the story. So that's why, some people are, oh, I'll do a 1 card reading, I'll do a 3 card reading. Okay, but then you're really only getting a small part of the picture. If I'm looking at 10 cards, then I'm looking at 10 different words that are in this sentence, that are in this story. And so maybe 1 card doesn't call to me, as they say, or it doesn't speak to me, but 8 out of 10 cards do. And 8 out of 10 cards kind of say the same thing in the same message. And you'll just begin to see patterns. That's all it is you're looking at patterns, you're looking at signs, you're looking at symbols. And when you begin to recognize those signs and those symbols, it just makes it easier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that was my experience when I was working with my deck, is that, excuse me, things become more fluid, and so it's like flow state or improvisation. You're not, as you mentioned a minute ago, you're not going through the book and saying, well, you're letting that go, and you're stepping into a space just like a good improvisational musician will do, and let the instrument relate with a more fluid part of thinking or movement of mind and body to produce something, which would be the music in that case, but also to produce an interpretation of the cards. When you're letting go, you're going into more of a flow state, instead of just, because I would do that too, in my nascent phase, with look at the thing, it's and then try to put it together mentally. But I think that's perhaps what you're pointing to, is that it's so like you said, the more you engage with, and the more you become familiar with, and you learn to let the cards just speak to you, instead of just having to do a raw intellectual kind of a read of them, as it were, outside of seeing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And no, it makes perfect sense, because
Okay.
when you pick up a card, you never know. I always say, notice what you notice, because there are things that may speak to you in a card that you have no idea what the book says it means, right? But what does the picture say? What does it look like? Is there water? Are there signs of life? Is this person happy? Is this person sad? Those are the details that are in the card.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just focused on what the book says it's about, then you're missing the ability you're not using your intuition,
Right.
and there are so many different readers. I can't say who's right, who's wrong, but the one red flag for me is if I go to a reader and the reader says, well, the cards say this, and I'm like, oh, okay, because the cards are confirmation. The cards are a reflection of the energy that is being shared. So the cards don't say anything. You are saying, you are the reader. You are the one who has the intuition. You are the one who has the power. And so when you say the cards say it, you're really giving away your power. I've, a lot of times, that's why I spend so much time shuffling. I'll get a feel for what I believe which cards are going to come up before I turn over a single card. Is because this is the energy that I'm connecting to. This is what I feel. And it's not that, I'm special. Not at all. But I think so often, because I made the same mistake myself. When I started reading, 20 years ago, I would do readings for people. And when they asked me for a reading, I just say, okay, let me get the cards. And I just whip out the cards. Now, whether I'm doing the show Read Me Live or a private reading, I don't get to the cards for 30 minutes, literally 30 minutes. And that's a deliberate choice. Like I say, even offline with nobody watching, I still don't go straight to the cards. Because first of all, one of the things that I learned is that the querent, the seeker, the person you're reading for, what happens when we're nervous is we put up walls. And those walls are there to protect you. Okay. So anything that your system, you're nervous about. So it takes time for a person to feel comfortable. It takes time for a person to feel safe. It takes time really to get to the heart of what they really want a reading on, what they want to know, what their question is. And so if you just jump right into the pool, you haven't even checked the temperature.
That makes a lot of sense. And if I could amend that back to the idea of like being in that flow state or the whatever fluid state, that relaxation process and that getting to open up space with that person, I think that speaks to, you know, affording, you know, the ability for the cards to do what your relationship, the three-way relationship, I should say, the triadic relationship between the cards and two people that are involved. That makes so much sense. Would it be good, or would you be up for, in case we have folks that might be tarot curious, but they don't know the structure of the kind of, again, the Rider-Waite kind of setup. When we talk about major arcana or the suites of cards, like swords or cups, would you mind talking? You don't have to go into super nitty gritty unless you want to, because we got all the time in the world, at least on my end. Like major arcana and then the suites underneath. And just because I think it also would be interesting because it's just a very elegant setup, at least to me, as far as especially the major arcana. You know, there's just the characters that are in there. So, to whatever degree, would you mind sort of breaking down what the constituency is?
Okay, so you have three different types. You have the major arcana cards, the minor arcana cards, and then you have the court cards. And so arcana meaning change. It means the secrets, the mysteries of the world, right? So major arcana are major life changes. These are things that change the course of history. These are things where life will never be the same. These are your marriages. These are your divorces. These are your funerals. These are your births. These are things that we consider make an impact or make an impression in your timeline, in your chart. These are things that actually, to a certain extent, matter, right? Whereas minor arcana, minor changes, is not that they don't matter at all. It's just that things that happen on a daily basis, they just affect you for today. That means, you know, you might got a flat tire today, or somebody may have come up and given me a rose today, and it's beautiful. But 20 years from now, I'm not going to be thinking about that flat tire. I'm not going to be thinking about that rose. So these are things that really don't affect us in the long run, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're doing a reading, one of the things you take note of is, do you have a lot of major arcana cards? This tells me that there are a lot of major shifts. This person is shifting in their life. They're going in different directions because they're learning different lessons. There are 22 cards in a major arcana, and each major arcana card teaches a lesson. Because again, tarot is the fool's journey. So it starts with card 0, which is the fool, and being open like the fool. And then it ends with the world. And so life is cyclical. Every time you complete one challenge, then guess what? You start a new challenge. You start at the beginning. You have to begin again, right? So minor arcana cards start at aces, which are 0, and they end with 10. So 10 is completion. 5 is your midpoint, which is usually your challenges. And then aces or 0 is unlimited potential. I like to think of the aces like a baby in utero, right? It hasn't been born yet. So because it hasn't been born yet, it has the full potential to be anything. It could be a lawyer. It could be the president of the United States. It could be a criminal, because once it's born, it is now in a certain environment. And the environment that it's born into, good or bad, begins to create and determine who it becomes. So now is actually tangible. So it actually has less possibility as opposed to 0, which is unlimited possibilities. So your aces are very, very, very powerful. And when you have multiple aces, it's telling you again that there are new beginnings, new directions that you're going into. So, but if you have a lot of minor arcana cards, that tells you that this person is not really going through major life lessons. They're not going through major shifts. They're not going through something that is going to affect them on the long run. And then you have your court cards. Pages are always the age around 13 to 16. There's a very young energy. Pages were like interns. The pages always slept at the foot of the king. They were always by the king's side. So anytime the king wanted a message delivered, he always sent the page. So now when we see pages, and mind you, in the days of kings and courts, it was prior to cell phones. So the page is the one who always sent the message. When you fast forward to 2025 into our day, you may receive a message, but it doesn't mean a young child is going to bring it to you. You may receive a text. You may receive an email. You may receive a phone call. It could be a carrier pigeon. But what it means is that you will receive a message.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have your knights. Knights to me are always around 20 years old to 25 years old. I always think of the knight as a college graduate because the knight is going out into the world. You always say he has to make a name for himself. So that's the energy of a knight, somebody who is starting out. He knows what he's about to do, what direction he's heading off on. That's the energy of a knight. And then you have your queen, you have your king. They're basically the same, whereas the queen is more maternal. She's very nurturing, whereas the kings are usually about structure. They're more paternal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see court cards, the court card is either an aspect of yourself that you are embodying, or these are people around you. Especially when you have a lot of like queens, it's like, okay, you got a lot of women around you, and maybe those people are in your ear. Maybe it's your friends telling you, what you should or shouldn't do. So those are really the major arcana, minor arcana in your court cards. And then, like you said, the suits, you have the cups. Cups are about emotions. Those are your feelings. Those are water. That can be love. Then you have your wands. Wands are fire. Wands are quick movement. Wands are career. If you have a lot of wands, again, that tells you that a lot of it is about their creativity, their career, what they're going through. Then you have your swords. Swords are always thoughts, ideas. If you have a lot of swords, that tells me that this person is thinking a lot. They're really in their head. They're not really in their feelings. They're not really in their emotions. And then you have the pentacles. Pentacles are always the physical manifestation of something. And I think that's an important point that many people miss, is they think, oh, pentacles are money, money, money. You may not necessarily receive the money, but you may receive, if you need something, the physical manifestation of what you need. If you like, oh my God, I got to buy a new house. I don't have, 200,000 for this house. Okay, well, maybe great aunt Becky leaves you a house. You didn't get the money, but you received the house that you needed. So these are all the different meanings.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that, because, again, we don't know who's watching. And so I like that we have this comprehensive unpacking, if you will, of the cards. And so I appreciate that very much. Let's see. A moment ago, you mentioned red flags, and, somebody will say, oh, the cards are telling me or showing, or this is what the card says. I think that's how you said it. Sorry if I'm misrepresenting it. But speaking broadly, what caveats would you offer the audience in terms of, like, when I was with Jillian Macbeth, I think was her, pretty sure that was her name. She would say, if you go to a reading and they start talking X, I think specifically she said, like if there's something really gruesome or negative comes up, and that was an example that she had cited, caveat to those who go to that reader and maybe don't go back, and so would you have any kind of insight on like if somebody wants to go somewhere to have their cards read and maybe pay the person to do it, what would you advise, or again, caution when engaging with somebody who is, hanging out their shingle as a tarot reader or a psychic or any of that kind of stuff?
Well, two things. I definitely agree with the aspect of if they're seeing negative things happen. Negative things happen. That's how life is. But if they just tell you absolutely this is going to happen, then run. Because the future is not written. The future is the future is created by what we do today. So
Mm-hmm.
even if someone saw something that was negative, that's basically on your current path with how things stand right now.
Mm-hmm.
So a good reader, even if they saw something negative, would be able to provide the instructions or the ways in order to modify it in order to have the highest possible good, right? A lot of times I will, and I got this comment from one of the people who I did a reading for on the show, and she's also a reader. After the show, she said, Sharifah, I love how you phrased everything in a positive way. And I said, she was like, even no matter what you saw, because I think a card that came up might have been interpreted as negative. And I said, I often have to think and go, how do I say this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because people who are coming to me for readings, they're coming to me because they believe that I know how to help them. That's what they're coming for. They
Mm-hmm.
want some type of guidance, right? And so I have to be able to phrase it in a way that will guide them in the highest possible good, in the most positive way possible.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's why I was telling the college students, whether it's right or wrong, it is what it is. That a lot of times people have this interpretation or this belief that the readers are magical. That if I go to them and they say this going to happen, that it's going to happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you say things that are positive, because there's always a blessing in every curse. There's always a lesson in it somehow. So phrase it in a way that creates a situation that is going to bring happiness and bring joy and bring positivity. The other thing is that a reader is just a seer. They're there to show you and to tell you what they see. But when some readers, I had a guy call me and I was the second person that read for him. And it's so interesting and so funny to me that he even called me. But the reason he called me, he said he just had a reading with somebody and he explained the issue with them, and they told him that it was a curse on him and that the only way to get rid of this curse is to pay them $20,000. And I was like, oh my God, I apologize for even the industry. Sometimes you have to apologize, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
my whole thing is this: no one can break a curse if there is a curse. You can pray, you can change your lives, but giving someone $20,000 to break a curse is not going to do anything but make that person $20,000 richer. If
Mm-hmm.
there was some type of negativity or something that's around you, then you can remove it. You can pray. You can meditate. You can ask whatever spirit guides God that you believe in to be able to help you through this situation. Because what most people forget is that we all have free will. Free will is what separates man from the angels. Angels just love God. They just love us. That's all they do is love, right? Man, we choose to love. We choose to love
Mm-hmm.
God. We choose to love each other. And so because we have free will, then nobody else has the ability to infringe on our free will. So if we, instead of giving someone $20,000 to break a curse, the positive aspect would say, you know what? Don't accept that. Don't believe that. Just, you know, that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it would take a act of faith to disregard this extortion that's going on, and that, somehow it will be calamitous for you to not submit to that extortion. I would think that that would take some faith right there to say, hey, I'll take my chances, because whatever you've put on me, there'll be a takeaway. Like you said, there could be something in there that changes your life, and maybe it's perceived as being scary or awful at first, but yeah, whatever happens in your life, you have to view it through the eyes of somebody learning from that experience, or growing and developing. Of course, there's exceptions, obviously, but I think if you can frame it that way, then maybe you have less fear about what may be down the road for you.
But
Now you,
there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So
right.
most of the things that we imagine are all in our head. We've
Hmm.
created these fears. And then if someone else adds to those fears and then says they'll charge you to remove these fears, I mean,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. But like I said, but if you're caught in that mindset of like, they have something on me, they have this power over me, or the juju's bad, or whatever, but that you just take a leap of faith and move through that and say, even if something weird happens, which may have absolutely nothing to do with this alleged curse, that you took that leap of faith and you taught yourself something. And even if you fall down and sprain your ankle or whatever, you try to associate that with it. But nonetheless, you'll move through it and you'll be okay. And like you said, don't let fear be the captain of your ship. Just have that faith that you'll be able to navigate your experience absent of any curse or whatever. So, but you spoke to belief and faith, and I think this might be worth bringing up. And back in the day when I was 30 something years ago, when I was working with the card, I had a friend and confided in her, and oh yeah, she was from a Baptist family, and oh, you didn't do that. That was the devil's hand, and all this and that. And I said, okay, so I made a note to myself, spend less time with this person, because I wasn't having any of that, So anyway, what do you see in terms of people who come to you, and is there a kind of no-go zone for some people, like that they'll push back on you a little bit, or they may be a more fundamentalist in their faith or whatever, like the person that I encountered. It was a lovely person. I didn't hold it against them. We were still friends, but I just kind of kept my mouth shut about stuff like that. What novelty do you see in people holding both a strong faith, let's just in Christianity or whatever, and being one who would find the tarot to be a useful tool for themselves?
Yeah, yes, I have a strong faith, and I've
Hmm.
encountered many people who believe that. Um, but they also, it's to each his own. For me, it's a tool to be able to get messages, to be able to get to receive messages. And all throughout scripture, there were so many incidences where people received messages,
Hmm.
and followed signs and symbols. And one of
Hmm.
the biggest ones that I point out is the three wise men followed the North Star. So
Hmm.
they had some type of astrology, numerology, which is all throughout scripture.
Hmm. Hmm. So to say that people of faith will still come to you, or any, that in your experience, in your world and what you've encountered, that people of faith will not use, I don't want to use a charged word like, a bias or a phobic reaction to this as, again, maybe being the hand of something nefarious. But you'll find that people of faith are comfortable, let me maybe say it that way, getting readings and not seeing it as
Yes,
crossing any lines of, disobedience or playing with fire or that kind of stuff. So you've encountered people who are people of faith who are comfortable coming forward and getting a reading done then, and not finding a conflict
absolutely.
there. Okay, good.
Absolutely. And the ones who find the conflict don't come,
Well,
you know?
yes, of course. Right.
Right. So the people that I read for are definitely people of faith, because
Hmm.
what they're looking for is a message. They're looking for some type of guidance. And
Hmm.
so that's one way, one tool. It doesn't matter. I mean, there are plenty of people who don't use cards or don't, use anything. I have plenty of friends who are mediums and channels that don't use a tool of, divination.
Right.
But the people of faith are the ones that know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God still speaks today, and He speaks
Hmm.
to people and He speaks through people, right?
Hmm. That's true, because as you said, the Bible is full of persons who, were not just reading from another book. They were bringing things in. They were bringing information in, or divinely inspired, or, however you want to frame that. That none of this came out of a vacuum, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, before we pivot to another part of your life, I want to ask, because this is always something, whether it's a tarot or anything else that somebody's doing, could be a psychotherapist. Can you share some stories or anecdotes of people who have either not very long after getting a reading or weeks later who came to you and said, the insights given to me in this reading helped me change my perspective. They helped me open up and see, be receptive to seeing things a certain way. And as such, or as a result of such, and this is probably following a similar track to the probabilistic, the future is open kind of thing that the cards are, suggesting that this is the way things at this point in time, this is the way things seem to be indicating for the future. So there's two tracks here. There is that is the probabilistic, or the, what the cards are saying through the relationship of the two people, but also like just the perspective of the recipient, the person getting the reading, just opening up and saying, oh gosh, yeah, insight shift or any of that. So do you have any, that was a long-winded thing, but do you have any stories you can tell of people that came to you and, days, weeks, hours, months later and said, oh, girl, Sharifah, you're not going to believe what this, what I gained from, listening to you and having a reading done?
Well, I'll tell you two quick stories that happened recently.
Okay.
And
Okay.
one of the things I love about the show Read Me Live, almost every show, there's some incident where I call it spirit shows up, where
Mm.
something happens and I'm like, oh my God, that was so beautiful. And the first was the actual very first show that I did with a dear friend of mine. And when I showed the box, which had the lovers on it, I said, I chose this deck because I love the lovers. And then I was shuffling the cards and the lovers card just popped out. I was like, oh, okay, it's the lovers. So I take the card, I put it back in and I'm shuffling the cards, shuffling and shuffling. And then I look down and the lovers card is at the bottom. And so I'm like, okay. So I shuffle some more. I go to do the reading. The third card that comes up is the lovers card. And I said, I don't know if you're looking for love or, you're interested in love, but I think God has a plan for you. And so I finished that. About 2 days later, he called me and he was like, I don't know what it is, but it's like something cracked open in me ever since you had that reading. And so we were talking and I'm not supposed to, but I was actually on the phone at the gym on the treadmill and I just took his call. And so he's telling me this and all of a sudden I just start listening and the gym is playing the song Heaven is a Place on Earth. And I was like, oh, I thought that was so beautiful because it really is a love story. And so fast forward a couple of weeks later, he has a girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
Like, so that was so beautiful. They reconnected. And then one of the second ones that happened is I was doing a reading for a friend of mine and she was talking and all of a sudden I heard, because, sometimes I get messages in different ways. I heard mix it up. And so I said, are you doing something new? She was like, no. I said, you're not doing anything new? She said, that's because I heard mix it up. And she's like, I don't know. I'm doing, I'm branching out and I'm focusing more on Hollywood and I'm working with a new partner. I said, okay, well, I guess mix it up. So after the show, a couple days after the show, I'm on her newsletter. She sent out a newsletter. This is someone who channels. And
Mm-hmm.
so she always teaches automatic writing.
Mm.
And so she sent out this email and to everyone on her newsletter, not just me. It wasn't written particular to me, but she said, I've decided after 17 years of teaching automatic writing, I'm no longer going to teach automatic writing. Spirit has moved me and told me that I should now teach mediumship.
Mm.
And she said in the newsletter that to use different ways to get to the same information. And I was like, but isn't that mixing it up? Like doing it a different way. So those are two that really stand out to me, stories that I love.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's neat. Like I said, I think that's a great connection for any of us listening, or myself especially. I love anecdotes of people who are reporting results, whatever
Mhm.
they might be, and so thank you for that. I appreciate that. Well, let's pivot to Ask Sharifah,
Mhm.
and I'll leave it wide open wherever you want to start with that. But I'll say to the audience again, there will be links down below to the website that we're referencing and the work that Sharifah does, so you can access it there, as well again as all of her socials. So let's talk about Ask Sharifah and what resides within your website there.
Well, AskSharifa.com is out of all the websites I've done, my longest. I've had that one up the longest, and it's
Okay.
where I do online marketing, SEO, SEM, PR. It's so much under Ask Sharifah, and that really just developed because, like I said, when I built my first website, people wanted me to build their website. I
Hmm.
marketed my website. People were like, "Oh, Sharifah, market my website," and so it just evolved and it grew over the last 25 years. And so I
Hmm.
love to work with business owners because my main message is do not face the unknown alone. Ask Sharifah. I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. I,
Okay.
I've I launched my first podcast in 2009. I've interviewed thousands of people, celebrities, business owners, some of the most successful companies in the world. You know, when
Hmm.
you can sit down with the leaders at Wells Fargo and Boost Mobile and so many different companies and ask the question, how do you do what you do? What is the story behind your company? Because I never really wanted to hear or talk about products and services. I want to know the story, kind of like when you're asking me, like Sharifa, what's your story? Who are you? And that's really what I've done with Ask Sharifa, but also because I've helped companies to raise millions of dollars. One of the things that I've done through the website, and it's the link on the website, is if companies are looking for funding, I can work with them in order to get funding for their business. I think the number is between 50,000 and I think it's 5 million, but that's through Regulation A plus crowdfunding.
Okay. On that subject, one of my little pet theories is, you know, obviously, and there's degrees in size of companies and corporations, but um, I think crowdfunding is so much more of a healthy way to get a business started than, say, doing an IPO and issuing stock for that company and being publicly traded. Now, this is just me and my little soapbox, but I honestly, and again, I'm deeply naive about big business, and I've owned four businesses of my own, so I have some small business knowledge, but the idea that you can set up a temporary agreement with a group of people or investors, and then you provide for them that they get what they came for, but they also helped you, and that everyone can move on satisfied, rather than what I see in public trading and being a public company is that you're constantly beholden to shareholders and expectations and the drive to continue to show growth and all these other little things that could be problematic for a company that may have difficulties showing, forever growth and things like that. So all that said, what's your sage on, and is it a relatively new phenomena, this crowdfunding? I'm ignorant. Is this something that's just taken off in popularity in the last 15, 20 years, or did it exist before the internet? I mean, were there ways to do that with the reach that you get now, or was it just smaller local kind of stuff? It's a big
Well,
question. I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. With Regulation A plus, President Obama signed it into law in 2016. And
Hmm.
one of the things that President Obama wanted to do was to open up the markets to non-accredited investors. And so
Hmm.
non-accredited investors are people who have a net worth of $1 million or less. So if you have a net worth of $1 million or more, you're now an accredited investor. And so the
Hmm.
thought process was that people who were non-accredited didn't have enough money to lose. Whereas if you were an accredited investor and you have a net worth of $50 billion, if you lost a million in an investment, it's not going to hurt you, right?
Hmm.
But it also kept people out of the markets. So if you do crowdfunding with Regulation A plus, you do have shareholders, but your shareholders, many of them are going to be friends and family. They're going to be the community. They can be your clients. They can be people on social media. These are people that really are in it to support you. I think
Mm-hmm.
the difference is the energy, and I'm really big on the energy of something. So what you're talking about as far as the shareholders and the big business is that those people are there simply to make a buck. That's their whole reason for going into this. Where if you do it from a crowdfunding perspective, most of those people just believe in you. You know, I had one friend, and I've been laid off 8 times. I'm a
Mm.
.com baby. I'm somebody who has helped raise funds for or been a part of raising funds for many companies, right? And so at one of my first companies where it was two brothers who created a company, and one was the idea person, the other one was a Wall Street guy. The Wall Street brother had all the money. And I asked him one day, I said, how do you decide which companies to invest in? And he said, I don't invest in companies, I invest in people.
Mm.
And so if you invest in people and you believe in people, then they'll be able to grow an excellent company. And so aside from crowdfunding, many people find it difficult to be able to get seed money or get enough money to actually grow their company. You know, we don't necessarily want to be able to, or to have to go out and get these high interest business loans. And you don't even have the track record or the profits coming in order to be able to justify this business loan. But if you have people who come in and they believe in you and they're willing to invest their money into the company or the product or the service that you offer, then you have the ability to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always just sat well with me, the idea that's it's a option to get yourself where you want to be from your vision to your to actualizing your business. Um, let's say we have a member of the audience that's a young woman and they have an idea for a business. And beyond going to AskSharifah.com, what what could we say to this young woman who again has, let's just know that she has a good idea, and it's something that, like you and I, we've been through the trenches a few times, and you a lot more than me. I mean, I've owned very small businesses, nothing spectacular. But what kind of advice would you impart on a 26-year-old woman who's got an idea and just really that's it, just has this baby in her head that she wants to give birth to in terms of a business idea, and especially in modernity with the internet and with marketing, which is again something that you can lend sage to.
Well, I always say there are cemeteries full of good ideas,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that most people take their good ideas to the grave. So I would say, what does it take to bring that idea to life? And I think people oversimplify it by saying, oh, it would take money. Oh, okay. But what is the money for? Right? So do you have a plan? Do you have a business plan? So let's put a business plan with this good idea in order to bring that idea to life. Because a lot of people have ideas, but investors usually want to know that you, at the very least, have some skin in the game, that you've invested your money into this company. If you have a good idea, do you know anything about business? Just because you love motorcycles doesn't mean you have the ability to operate a motorcycle business. So
Mm-hmm.
I always recommend taking some business courses, basic business courses, accounting courses. You want to be able to know every idea of the business. So it's wonderful to have a good idea. I think that's great. But how do we take your good idea and make it into a business? So if
Mm-hmm.
it's a good idea, you have the next big thing as far as clothing. Okay, what does it take in order to come up with a mock-up or come up with a prototype? I mean, that's really where I start with people is, do you just have a good idea? Because one of the things that changed for me in the early 2000s when I first started doing this, I would believe people. And people will say, you know what, I'm going to make this business, I'm going to create this business, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then I look at some of those people and they haven't done anything with it. Or, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to own my own business because I hate my job. I hate my boss. I hate my coworkers. I hate my commute. 30
Mm.
years later, they're still working at the same job. Right. So it's wonderful to have an idea, but what are you doing to make that idea tangible? What are you doing to bring that idea to life? And for me, at the very least, it starts with a business plan, a plan. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate business plan. I thank God for AI and for Chat GPT. And not only just Chat GPT, there are many different AI tools. Inso is a great business plan tool, but what you do is you sit there and you tell it what you want, what your ideas are, and it will spit out a business plan that you can take to investors. This is my plan. This is how I expect to, because investors, is most investors, especially in 2025, are not angel investors. Angel investors are people who invest really, truly out the kindness of their heart. And these are people who have billions of dollars to spare. And they say, you know what, Justin has an idea. Let me give them some money. And usually angel investors are people you have an existing relationship with. These are people, maybe people who are at your church, people, maybe somebody you worked with in the past and they know who you are. Most investors are not angel investors. Angel investors want to know, first of all, how I'm going to get my money back, when I'm going to get my money back, what is my return on that investment? And if you don't have the answers to those questions in writing, again, it doesn't have to be a specific business plan, but it has to answer those questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very, very practical, right? Kind of the reality of getting yourself started and getting up and running. And I would only amend that from my personal experience. And I've owned a restaurant, a newsstand, and 2 landscape businesses. Is in my doing that, there had to be a lot of desire behind it, a lot of hunger almost, to want that, to actualize. Like you said, somebody can sit and conceptualize for 25 years and, never leave the office that they're working in. But really and you could even level it up to passion, I think, that you have to be on fire when you take that. And I always use the baby. Like I said, this 26-year-old, she has a baby in her head. It's called her business, and you want to birth it out right. And then you want to care for that thing. When I had my restaurant, it was my baby and I had to love it. It was vulnerable and fragile and it could get wiped out any minute, but we kept it alive and kept it healthy for the time that we did, and then we sold the baby. But that's where the metaphor dies, right there. I sold my baby. But anyway, sorry, I'm babbling about my stuff. Now, one other question I have for you relating to the services you provide is I'm super ignorant about a lot of things, but SEO and the evolution of SEO. You've been in this for a while. Can you speak to that? Because that would be enriching for me. I have no clue, and I know what it is, obviously, but I mean, I just can you share some insights on SEO that would, again, maybe raise people's interest to come and check out your website?
So SEO is search engine optimization. And so often when people build websites, especially I see this when people were like, oh, I built my own website. Okay, That's wonderful. But when you go to their website, the title of the website just says home. I'm like, okay, well, there are 8 billion homes on Google, on the search engines. So what the search engines do is they categorize websites by what you say you do. So your product, your service should be in the title, and it should be something that people search for. That should be included in the title. That's what you optimize your website so the search engines can read it. So you have your meta tags, you have your meta keywords, you have your meta description, and this meta information is what tells the search engines what it is that you do. Another great way to get high search engine ranking that people forget is their sitemap. Adding a sitemap to your website, because it maps it out for the search engines on what information is on the website. So every time you make an update to your website, the search engines will be notified and they'll continue to give you higher search engine ranking. And
Okay.
so when search engines look at a website, what they're primarily looking at is not only the text that you have, but backlinks to your website. Backlinks are other websites that link to your website because they
Mm,
figure if this website thinks you're important enough to link to it, then you must be important. So backlinks are important. Articles are wonderful because not only do articles have a lot of keywords that the search engine uses, it's a mindset, right? There's a hierarchy in websites. The website, and I always ask people this question, when you search for most things, there's usually one website that comes up on top. And it's usually, you want to guess, Justin?
mm, no clue.
No clue. Wikipedia.
Okay.
It is one
Okay.
of the highest ranked websites.
Okay.
And that's because it's really a blog. It provides content. So
Okay.
the websites that always come up first are always content driven because the thought process, even for an algorithm, is that you're providing a service. You're providing information that people may be looking for. So
Mm,
e-commerce websites are your shopping sites, things that just sell. Those are going to come up lower because again, it's like, who are you thinking about? Are you thinking about yourself? Are you thinking about making money? Are you there to be of service? So it's
mm-hmm.
not to say e-commerce websites are bad, but even if you have an e-commerce website, have content in it. Put some content on your pages. Share some information. FAQs are wonderful, but offer a service. Another way that you can optimize your website is your images. Don't forget to put your tags, your alt tags, your descriptions on your images because the search engines, especially Google Images, they have images. And so when people search for them, they can find your site. So there's plenty of ways to optimize your website. But the most important thing I think I would say is your titles and descriptions, but articles, content. Content is king. And
Okay.
the search engines look at engagement, website engagement, meaning how long a person sits on your website, how long they search around. And so if you don't have content for them to read and sit on your website, they'll just go to your website and they'll just leave, which is considered the bounce rate. Just like,
Mm,
in the hood, people say, I'm getting ready to bounce. Okay, it
yeah.
means that, I went, I saw, I left.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you for that. I appreciate that because, like I said, I have a website, but I also have no clue. So I appreciate you opening that up a little bit for me. And Sharifah, we've been talking for about an hour now, which is hard to believe. I love these conversations because time just goes right on, right past us when we're talking. So, but
Yes.
what I'd like to do and what I typically do with my guests is open up a little space where if there was something that you and I didn't talk about, if there's something you want to bring out that's part of what we talked about, either the Tarot or your Ask Sharifa, or if there's something new that you want to bring in as a kind of wrapping up or conclusive or summative ideas or thoughts or something that you're doing right now or you're going to be doing that you want to share with people that we can kind of bring this one in for a landing.
The one thing I want to share with people is that we are living in some strange times. And I still believe in the phrase, be the change that you want to see in the world. Be there
Mm,
for people. Do whatever it is that you can to help someone else. I always say, God's got me. And while
mm,
God's handling my problems, that's why I can read for other people is because I don't have to worry about anything. God's got that. And so I can
mm.
be of service. And I believe that the kingdom of heaven is in the servant's hand. And so as long as we continue to serve mankind and humanity, especially in these trying times, I believe that's how we all succeed and how we all win.
Mm, mm. That's a beautiful way to bring this in, Sharifa. I really appreciate that because I think I can't say anything beyond that. Just thank you. Yeah, I think that's very wise, and you know, we navigate uncertain waters, but if our vessel is strong, then we'll be okay and we'll get through. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate having you as a guest, and you were sharing your insights about the Tarot, as well as sharing about what you do to provide for yourself and for others in the mutual relationships that you develop with Ask Sharifah. AskSharifah.com. I need a drink of water. My mouth's dry. But anyway, much appreciation. And also thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your show. I loved it. I thought it was very nice. So I appreciate your hospitality in that regard.
Thank you.
Of course. So I will say Godspeed to you, and we will stay in touch. And again, anyone in the audience listening or watching, all the information for Sharifah will be down in the description field of the video or the Spotify, whatever that is. I guess it's still a description field. So anyway, Sharifah, it's been wonderful. Thank you very much. And to the YouTube audience, I hope, and Spotify audience, hopefully you all had a good time with us here today, and we appreciate your company. So I'll say goodbye to you after we're done recording, but to everyone listening or watching, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one.